seems to be lethargic morning sleep. So I would prefer to wait for the audience to fill up the hall. Please let us start. This morning's session is on GALF 2016 Dialogues, the City and Archive. We have eminent speakers here, Mayank, Austen, Soofi. We have Mr. Ben Judah, and in conversation will be Dale Luminous. Without much of introduction, because we have been knowing all this since yesterday, and because today Ben was there at the inaugural room, and we have listened to him. It will be a pleasure to listen to all them. And may I pass on the mic to you, the floor to you? Please, thank you.
Good morning. Hello. I'm not Dale, I'm Kaustabh. Dale is doing another session. So this session is titled City as an Archive, and we have Mayank and Ben Judah with us, and both of them lead a very interesting sort of life as an explorer of two different and two very vibrant cities. Mayank works in Delhi. He runs a blog called thedelhiwala.com, and he just doesn't write, but has various forms of documentation that he engages with in terms of engaging with Delhi, and photographs, videos, short films, and other such stuff. And Ben Judah was a foreign correspondent in Russia, and now he's based in London, and his book, This is London, has come out recently, and one of the most fascinating books that probably I'm looking forward to read in the next couple of days. So without much further sort of, let's begin into the session. I've stayed in Delhi for 2 years, but I don't have much idea of London, so I thought I was wondering how I could sort of connect both these cities and probably bring both of you on the same ground. So I thought why not probably ask some very generic sort of questions where you can probably then delve into very specific methods of working into both the cities. So first, I would really want to know from both of you is, could you, because city has multiple temporalities with it, because there are different kinds of people living with different sense of time. So as somebody who archives a city or somebody who engages with the life of the city, how do you then decide, or how do you then engage with these temporalities? But I'm quite sure London also has these kind of vivid, multi-varied times that people live in, and also Delhi, I'm very sure that people do that. So I would probably ask them to start on these. Probably, yes.
Thank you all for coming. And you were talking about, thank you for introducing both of us, thank you. So you've noticed my work, so grateful to you. And you were asking about Delhi and London are very different cities. I've never been to London, but I think they're so linked to each other, like because of our past, which is more important to us also, And when you go to Delhi, you see so much of the heritage with the British built, with all our mixed feelings about the British as our colonial masters. But one of the most beautiful places where I love going at night, just walking alone with my camera and my book, is Connaught Place. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a Delhi Central Commercial District. It was set up in 1940s by the Duke of Connaught. And it has got these marble columns, and it's white, and it's, when I close my eyes and when I miss Delhi, I see walking myself in Connaught Place. So, in that way, Delhi and London are very closely linked to each other. But you're talking about many layers of a city. And I don't know about London, but in Delhi, I think as a writer and as a photographer, I think I'm very lucky to live in a city like Delhi, which may sound very cruel, but since we are living in the developing world, and Delhi is the capital of the developing country. It has got so many social and income disparities that, if you forget about the Delhi has got many layers of histories, you just walk from one place to another, from one neighborhood to another. It's like going from one continent to another. For 3 years I stayed in a red light district in Delhi. I wrote a book about that. And in the afternoon I'll be spending time with the prostitutes in their kotas. And then I would think, and there's a place in Delhi called Khan Market, which I really love, I love going to Cafe Turtle and having hot coffee cake there. But when I'll be in the red light district, it will be impossible to imagine that there is a place like Khan Market where the rich, beautiful people will be walking around, going into bookstores, living their life. Because this place where, people from the most poverty-stricken parts of the country, the women would come and make their living. That seemed the real Delhi. That seemed the only Delhi. And then I'll just take an auto, and it'll be just 15 minutes, and I'll be in Khan Market. And then the world of GB Road, the world of the red light district will be like a mirage. How can that exist? So in Delhi, it's very fascinating to walk from one neighborhood into another, from one bungalow and in Chanakipuri with all those air purifiers, and then you go out and you're suddenly in the world's most polluted city. So in a way, it's very exciting to live and to trace those different layers.
Would you like to talk about writing about London and how I deal with multiple temporalities?
Because back here, the kind of image of London that people have is very of celebration and of opulence. But your book sort of ruptures that understanding and probably just gives a glimpse of a different kind of London that is becoming. So could you then probably dive into that?
Well, personally, I think that's because the British were so committed to building, in Delhi and in Calcutta and across India, buildings that gave an illusion of London. And I think those buildings still sort of dominate the imagination, not only here but also in Britain. One of the fascinating things is that the buildings have set the historical record far more than the actual sort of chaos and inefficiency of the empire. They've left this image of sort of calm control, which is very far from the reality of the history books. We're talking about the London that exists behind those buildings and behind the monuments. I was born in London over the course of my life, in the course of our lives. Most London as the city has become almost unrecognisable apart from the buildings, which remain mostly the same. And that's because of a huge flood of foreign...
Microphone, please.
Like that?
Yeah.
So there's a huge flood of foreign migrants and foreign wealth. The percentage of Londoners who are now foreign-born is 40% of the population, and the whole sort of old districts of the British aristocracy can be sort of largely replaced. The playgrounds of the Qatari or the Russian or even the Indian oligarchy, leaving the sort of grandsons of viscounts and dames to seek a less scrupulous accommodation in Zone 2 or even for some Zone 3. I worked abroad as a foreign correspondent, and for several years I was physically and mentally in Russia, and I had the chance to sort of zip across Russia's vast expanses, meeting sort of corrupt ministers, delinquent priests, the occasional saintly figure, and partisans of far left and far right movements. And on the course of this journey, which was my first book, Fragile Empire, I realised that foreign correspondent isn't only an increasingly rare job. A foreign correspondent is also a way of writing, it's a way of engaging with a society. And what's distinctive about this is that it precisely zips between the two Delhis that you were describing. It's very common in a sort of Guardian article or a sort of FT piece or a New York Times magazine virtuoso to go between them. But when we write about ourselves in Britain or in the United States, we don't do that. In fact, our favourite mode of writing about ourselves or engaging our society is purely numbers, it's polling, it's data, it's disembodied facts, it's politicians presented sort of naked to their audiences. And returning from Russia and sort of scanning through the newspapers on my iPad and then reading the tweets, I found that I couldn't find the answers to the question of this changed Britain, this visibly changed Britain that was all around me. So I came to the decision that I had to do a foreign correspondence book. I had to subject the British to their favourite form of writing about the rest of the world, which I think was sort of strangely unapplied to home. So I began exactly as you did. I began by walking, I began by driving, I began by tracing, I began by living in different places, immersing, I began by putting on costumes and roles, pretending, infiltrating. I used the fact that I spoke some European languages to work on a Polish building site, to enter the houses of the rich as a labourer. I do not speak English. I joined a begging gang, lived on the streets of Hyde Park corner, and lived in sort of fetid doss houses at Far East London with Romanian migrants, obviously, to abet, to use a sort of hackneyed phrase in Dickensian conditions. But as the writing took place, I started to come up against precisely the problem that you were talking about. How do you capture the different clocks of the city? How do you capture the way the city looks from so many different sort of fitting vantage points? At first, when I started preparing the draft, I had a kind of quite drab, quite sort of boring sort of anthropologist's sort of layout. I'd start with a sort of a poorest migrant class, and I'd go all the way to the top, to the end of the sort of Nigerian oligarch. The idea is that London had been transformed into an immigrant city, and all of the characters in the book I was profiling and living with, as well as I discovered, would be sort of migrants. You'd be able to see London through their eyes. But as I sort of wrote the draft, it really worked. The anthropological approach wasn't revealing the city, it wasn't doing what I wanted. So I kind of shuffled it around. I realised that the way that it would work best would be to follow the arc of life. Immigration is coming to a city, whether you come from a remote Indian village, or you come from a sort of not quite so remote Eastern European country to a city like London or Paris, it's an act of reinvention, it's a new beginning. And the book is laid out on this arc of life, in which, as you go through the different chapters, you meet different migrants on that life journey, from arriving, finding work, falling in love, having children, failing, succeeding, going mad, ending up penniless, people are destroyed by London, created by London, and it ends in the phases of death, which in Britain we don't want to engage with as a society. We love sterility in Britain, and sort of white walls and white rooms and disinfectant hand wash. It ends in phases of memory loss, dementia in hospitals, and death. So the reason that worked, I think, to capture the temporalities of London is the original anthropological approach showed me that actually the way you experience the city, ethnicity is not a key difference. There's a huge difference, a big difference, but actually age is far more important. And as I was interviewing these sort of hundreds of people, I found that whether they were telling stories of being a young man or an old woman or a mother or a father, with a key difference that shaped their engagement with the cities. That's how the book is arranged. And in ways to give people more of a sense of the different temperament. I took a lot of sort of risks, stylistically. First of all, don't care, and secondly, because I believe in being a sort of risky writer. And I tried to find exactly the right genre for each of the characters, for each of the experiences. Some of which shift from a form of prose poem, some of which shift to more classic, kind of embedded or undercover, some of which follow their voices, some of which sort of take on sort of epic qualities. and some which has potentially disappeared apart from as a device to let them speak. So that's how it all sort of ties together. And I'll let you be the judge of whether it works when you read it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll just take off from what you said.
Can I just add one point to what you were saying? I found that idea very interesting and I was not conscious about it, but I think that's how I like to, I like any writer who's writing about a city should be like, and which I try to do, is to be a foreign correspondent in your own city, you know? Never to take things for granted. Everything which you're saying, including my family, my parents, or my neighborhood, or the neighborhood next door, everything should be like, you know, this is the first time I'm landed without a visa. And I should look at it from a foreigner's point of view, not like from some particular American or Britman or Russian or Japanese point of view, but just I'm a stranger to this world. So I really like the idea of foreign correspondent, and I fancy that's what I try to be like. You know, nobody's hired me from New York Times or Washington Post, but I've hired myself as a foreign correspondent in Delhi.
No, it's interesting because you, at one point, you would say that the outlook to the city then becomes of foreign correspondent, but your methods on ground are also where you, both of you, dissolve yourself into the public. So where you would then sit with the Romanian beggars, or you would then be like friends with the children in the GB room. So, and then there's some sort of kind of, this shift from like one where you train yourself to be a foreign correspondent in these spaces, but at the same time you are also able to dissolve yourself into whatever your documenting device, a pen or a camera. So how does that dynamic work?
Well, the foreign correspondence is not, you're not being rigid about it.
Yeah.
So they don't begin with sort of date lines, and they don't. It's just a sort of like aesthetic approach, and obviously like the book is influenced by the writers I love and poems I love and all kinds of traces I can't quite kind of work out. One thing that I decided to do because I'm worried about influence is during the whole process of which I was writing the book and researching it, I read no histories of London. I read no, I didn't want to know that this particular street, 1722, I wanted to see it as the people in the book would see it, not knowing. As the Somali immigrants don't know the history of this area. I wanted to go and find out what the area remembered, not what a professor in Cambridge or in UCL remembered.
Well, in Delhi I always have this challenge. So, if I sit with a prostitute or with the children, and every day I walk around the streets and I meet people from different cross-sections of the world, from rich people and people who are living in the street, who are sleeping with stray dogs, and each person, one can never be judgmental about lives, so even from outside you can think, oh God, this guy is living in Amrita Shergill Marg, what grief in the world he would have. But we all have such private stories, and just to try to intrude, just try to get a sense of their life is very interesting to me. And every person has something fascinating, and every time I'm talking to a person, I get a sense of the city, which I myself could not make it out from my own life. But one of the challenges, I'm just talking about it, one of the challenges which I face, which I always constantly struggle with, that I'm, compared to many others in a country like India, in a city like Delhi, I'm very privileged. I hang out with the beggars, I hang out with the prostitutes, I hang out with very rich people also, with people who love books, with writers. I know that at the end of the day, I will go back to my home, it's air conditioned, lined with books, and I can sleep on my bed, clean bed. And so, just and of course, when one writes, one cares for the reader, but to me, what is also important is that when I'm writing about somebody's life, I should not steal their life. I should not say that this is how their life is. This is what you're supposed to feel like. For me, it's very important to convey the reader a distance between me and that person, because when I'm writing about somebody, I've got a power. I can manipulate their life, and they don't have that power. So I try to be very respectful of that. So So that's one of the challenges which I do when when I'm talking about people meeting.
One of the interesting things that I observed in both of your works that your blog is called The Alternate History of Your Gateway to
Alternative Delhi.
Alternative Delhi. So what do you think is the mainstream Delhi?
Oh, don't take it seriously, I was just being pretentious, I just wanted to be cool, why should I say that it's a gateway to mainstream Delhi, so it's an alternative Delhi. But jokes apart, I think, I want to write about things which you don't see in newspapers, which you don't see in news channels. I want to write things which are not of immediate interest, which are not happening, which you'll be very interested to read today, but tomorrow they will become stale. I'm trying to create a window to a world, where after 20 years, if you look at that website, if you look at the stories, they won't get stale. They're not about Jayalalitha's death, for instance. There could be something about, for instance, Jayalalitha's life in the film world when she fell in love with somebody, but just that snatch, that feeling, I want to focus on that, that's the thing which according to me will last, to me, fiction is very important. Fiction lasts. Fiction is, in a sense, more real than non-fiction. But here I'm not saying that I write fiction, but I'm saying I want to explore the aspects where there's something about feeling rather than just about the outer world.
So, in contrast to the alternative Delhi, your book just calls This is London, and you fix the new London that is becoming in terms of the immigrants, more so illegal immigrants that you are focusing on.
Not exclusively illegal.
Okay,
because still, Britain hasn't left the European Union. Anyone from sort of Poland or Romania has come to the UK is legal. Full rights to be there and work there. So, why the title? Sometimes you write a book and the title is there before the book. This has yet to happen to me. Mostly the books are there and I'm just struggling to find the title. It's quite an agonising process, a sort of word game, a sort of Sudoku of your own head. And a lot of people sort of encouraged me to call the book The Other London. And I was so annoyed by this suggestion that the majority experience of the city, which is the immigrant city, which is the city of the poor, which is the city of the super rich, which is the city of the destitute, and the city of the billionaires, is somehow another London, sort of removed from the London, from our London. That the idea to call it This is London as a title that would force people to realise that the world that I'm from, and similar sort of dynamic that you were describing, is actually a very small and a very isolated one that, even though it thinks of itself as the city, as the life of the city, as the definition of the city, is it's just a sort of small part of it. It's not even the dominant one. I'm talking about the lives of the book buyers and the book writers and the book reviewers, just the world of the British upper middle class, which is one of the few stratums of London.
That could be the other London.
Yes, it's precisely. And that's most people it is.
Yeah.
And that's, London is the only one not to be remade by foreign migrants, foreign wealth. So the world of the super rich has been transformed, and the world of below it has been completely transformed. And also, what I liked about the title is its simplicity. My first book had a sort of overlong sort of second part of its title, and sort of broadened me afterwards. And I like the sort of exclamation point.
Also, Mayank's, your work is I just, initially when I started looking, I thought it might sort of romanticize a certain, because there is, in Delhi there's this tendency of, romanticizing what the old Shalinamar part, old Delhi parts. But your work then, actually expands to a larger Delhi that is overtly increasing.
I love you, thank you so much, because most of the people confuse my work with old Delhi, which is not at all true. Somehow somebody has noticed that my work is not only about old Delhi and tombs and mosques and dargahs, and I talk about other places and people also. Thank you
Because
so much.
you could, there's a photo of Ifko Chowk, and these areas of Delhi that are being now sort of expanding. So there is also, and it also will tie in with Ben's work, is that the influx of the migration, and how that is sort of changing the dynamics of how we experience the city.
Yeah, that's just one aspect, the migrants of a big city, big, complicated, messy, chaotic city like Delhi. But that particular thing shapes the experience. And Delhi is a city where nobody is really from Delhi. I'm also not from Delhi, you know. I arrived just 10 years ago. So I don't really focus just on the experiences of migrants, but I recognize that that's a part, that's adding to the city. And in a city like Delhi and of London and Moscow and all the great old cities in the world, you know, so much of the past is going away. So I want to record that, but I don't want to like sob and cry over the past which is going away. I also want to love the new things which are coming. So I love, you know, I really love going chronicling middle class homes. You know, I'm also from middle class home. So when I go to my parents' home, you know, there are plastic flowers in the drawing room. You know, my aesthetic self earlier I used to revolt against it, but now I really love it. You know, this is the first time. You know, like my grandfather was a farmer. So my father was the first middle class guy in his family. So when you enter his home and you see how somebody goes up, you know, in the world, and you see it through these things, you know, you go to people's bathroom and there's a very thick towel but slightly torn which have been kept since last 3 years, and there's only one towel for the whole family. So all those things are very moving, and these are not the parts of the old world, these are the signs of the new world, and I really want to capture that.
The metro,
Yeah, the metro train, you know, like it's like, but the buses also are very fascinating.
Yeah, one feeling that I was getting while going through your work, Ben, was that there is some sort of tension that is also being generated following the migration that has happened in London. So what are the local in the sense people who have been in London for so many years? So what are their what are the tensions that are sort of emerging out of such?
Well, it depends on their social class, essentially. Which is, there was a survey by the now somewhat discredited pollster YouGov before the Great Brexit referendum, which revealed that the most anti-European, the most pro-European parts of the country were in London, and that in the most pro-European part of the country, in Hampstead and in the area around that in North London, people were experiencing immigration as colleagues from France and Spain, or a cheap Spanish nanny, or sort of new and interesting food. They were experiencing immigration as something that was helping them consume, something that was helping them sort of get the most out of London. But it wasn't really affecting their home life, it wasn't really affecting their workplace. Whereas if you went to the most sort of Europhobic part of the country, which is an area called Havering, with a somewhat known town called Romford in the middle of it. People there were experiencing immigration very differently. They were experiencing immigration as being the only person working at the supermarket who didn't speak Polish in the shelf stacking job and was feeling cut out. They were experiencing immigration by knowing that they were being undercut in the labour market, because as they drove to work every morning to do some electrical fittings, there were a bunch of Polish labourers touting on the street corner, not picked up by surveys, not following minimum wage regulation, and they were experiencing immigration as other people on the waiting list for support from the government for housing and so on. So in the UK, the UK is historically not an ethnically complicated society. If you look at Northern Europe and Northwestern Europe in particular, historically this was never like the Middle East or India or Africa, a sort of ethnically complicated place that you have to live with that. And this is still very challenging for the English to think about, not to mention the Scots or the Welsh. And there's people talk about immigration as if it's one thing. Immigration is good or it's bad. Immigration, in fact, is just a sort of force of history. And there is the good and the bad and the ugly and the beautiful. A lot of what I try to do in This is London is show that all these different perspectives.
I think we have time for like a couple of questions. Anybody?
Talk very clearly so nobody gets.
Oh, there's a
I have a question about your work in Delhi. Do you, as you're doing the hanging around and getting people's stories and tuning in, do you return later, or do they know what you've made of them? Because this is a complicated relationship, and you have an ongoing relationship with the city. And so my question is, do you have an ongoing relationship with them, and how does that maintain itself, and how do you deal with those questions?
Well, that's a very difficult question, and I'm grateful to you that you asked this, because I constantly struggle with, especially in a city like Delhi, where it's a very tragic situation that I write and think in English, and most of the people whom I interact with, and most of the people in Delhi don't write and think in English. So when I write about them, I'm actually stealing their life, and they're not being able to read it. So I really have to be respectful of that. I really have to make sure that if someday they come across this on a website, they should not feel humiliated, they should not feel ashamed. But that's besides the point. I hang out with people, and I speak good Hindi. I'm fluent in Hindi. So what I try to do is that when I'm hanging out with people, it could be anybody, it could be you also if I meet you in Lodi Garden in Delhi. So it's not like this that I'm taking down your interview or I'm putting on a mobile phone and recording your voice. We both are chatting, So I'm getting to know your life, but you're also asking questions. It's a two-way process. It's just that I happen to write, and they know about it. It's not that when I just sit down with them, I say, hey, I'm a blogger, and I'm doing this and I'm writing. It's more organic. We just start talking, we develop a brief bonding. And sometimes it so happens that, now I know people whom I've written again and again and again, but then there are many people whom I've never met again, because you meet them randomly. So in a way that's very unfair, but I'm a writer and I can manipulate that, So that's how it is.
So I think we'll end this at
So you said one should never be judgmental about life, but don't you think being judgmental sometimes is quite humane?
Well, this is kind of a moral sense answer. But sometimes I'm judgmental when something really offends me, something which I think is really, really horrible. Then I'm very judgmental about people and situations. But like suppose, I'm a middle class guy and I see a really rich guy coming in BMW, then I won't be judgmental about it. His dad is very rich and what a cool life he's living and I really hate him. You never know, his life might be worse than yours, So then I try not to be judgmental. As a writer, it's very important not to be judgmental. As a writer, it's very important to understand who you are, who is this person, why does he behave that way, why does he think that way, what's his outlook of the world. I'm not here to judge the world, I'm here to record things, That's more fun.
Yeah, that's right. But then, say you're standing on the road and you see a Mercedes coming by you, next to you. Won't you feel like, that guy has ego or something like that?
No, I won't. And let's go. I will never feel like that.
Then I must say you are not judgmental at all. Like, if I was on your place, I would definitely feel that. Thank you.
Well, I'd try to add one thing, which is, I think there's a lot of expectation on writers, and especially on young writers, to have a polemic to be political, to take on a lot of the qualities of social workers or crusaders. I really reject that. I think that your responsibility is to be a writer and to write, and that expectation, if you take it upon yourself, will harm your work. You shouldn't confuse yourself.
I completely agree with you. I'm not here, I'm very sure about this, that through my writing and photography, I'm not here to change the world. I'm just here to understand my world and look at everyone with, sympathy is perhaps a crude word, but try to understand.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the fun of being a writer.
No, I really agree with that.
If I may ask you something about you know that our cities are very historic and they're full of history. But then when migrant communities come in, the mess and the collapse increases. But what I don't understand is why is it that with all these migrating people, don't they have any means whereby they could be educated about the history of the cities? It's like you are saying that you write a novel and you don't want to see the mosques and the masjids and the gardens and the churches and all that, right? Because you're involved as a migrant writer, you are involved in the new city, and you would rather put the old city aside.
Very specifically.
My question is, why is it that our guidebooks to all our great cities do not tell you about the history of the city? And so tourists don't learn about the history of the place they visit. Nor do our books.
Just to sort of pin something on that, that's a huge topic.
It's a huge topic.
I think that one thing that I notice is that we learn about the place that we live, and we really come to understand it not through books and not through novels and not through films, but through the storytelling of the people that we love and the people who are around us. And if you grow up in a place, you grow up constantly being told small little stories. And we live, whether or not we realise it or not, in these little ecosystems of storytelling. When the population changes, when people move away and they move away for better lives, or they leave the village, or they move from one part of London to another, or one part of Delhi, those stories go with them. And it's one of the things I found, immersed in London's migrant communities, is that the old kind of white working class Cockney world of those stories was essentially inaccessible to them, because they were not in a position to watch or connect with sort of television shows from decades ago, or murders that had taken place that had scarred the population for decades, or details of the Second World War or further back, but that in its place was a whole new sort of mythology and a whole new world of myth that, and I found it very important in my work to chronicle how they saw where they lived, all those mixtures of confusions and half-truths and legends that were springing up amongst the migrants.
Well, I'll just say that, of course, one must be very respectful to monuments and histories, and one must do, but to me, people are the monuments of the city. They make the city, and those monuments and buildings are beautiful and they should be looked after, but, everything is important.
I think we'll end the session here. You can probably discuss this later. We'll have to make space for the next session. Thank you. Both of you have been a great panel. And Ben's, I don't know about Mayank's book, but Ben's book is available from today for sale at Leonard's bookstore there, so you can just go pick a copy.